Okay, I think we're gonna make a start at this time. As always, I appreciate anyone who also joins this live online session later on through reviewing a recording. As I've shared before, please do remember that these are additional resources that I offer to you. So I completely understand that we all have busy schedules. I wanna offer it as a more of a space and opportunity to form a sense of community, but at the same time, this is an asynchronous course, so if you do prefer to simply review the materials from the learning modules, that's totally fine. So let's have a little bit of a look of this week's content. This week we are focusing on looking at tissues. So on the actual learning material, we'll kind of explore a little bit about the relationships between cells and the microscopy, how that has enabled us to study various different kinds of tissues. And then we'll review the four main tissue types: epithelia, connective, muscle, and nervous tissue. I do want to always open up the meetings with a little bit of checking in how we're doing. And I also want to spend a little bit of time today to talk about the most important updates that I have. Again, I want the announcements to be more than a pre-programmed list of assignments that comes through. So if one or multiple students present questions to me also in one-to-one nature that I think would be helpful for the entire class to hear, I always try to share those. So we'll share them not only as an announcement, but through this live online session as well. There's been some questions about how to succeed optimally on this course. So I prepared a few resources also when it comes to the study skills. But like I said, these live online sessions can be anything that we want them to be, anything that the participants present choose and want to spend the time on. But if there's no formal requests or if informal requests or a bigger agenda from any participant, then I normally try to go through kind of a nutshell version of the course material for that week. And then we'll have a little bit of a look on what's to come as well. So that sounds like a good place for us to start. And again, since I do know that the in-person attendance is a little lower today, I encourage you to take a moment to check in with yourself. How are things going? But also consider if there's something that you can share with me, what's working well and what can we do even better. And you can share those directly with me through Canvas messages, or you can use the discussion forums. And I'll be also facilitating a couple of polls throughout the semester. It's important for me, if something is working well and we should keep doing that I am aware of that, but also if there's an opportunity for me to change things, that sooner I know about it, sooner I can do that change and sooner we can address those needs. I'd rather not wait till the end of the semester to tackle those things. Today we're just gonna skip the Pueblo's book inward. If we have more attendance, then we'll consider doing that at another time. But before I start reviewing the actual material from the chapter, I want to jump out of this presentation and I want to instead share what you would see on a Canvas course. There's few things that I want to highlight for us. So let me get my screen shared with you. And at this point, you should be able to see the our Canvas course as you would land there as a student. And I want to spend a moment talking about what we have in the announcements. So just recently, just today, I posted a little bit of an update, and there were some really good items that a few students brought forward or had questions about, and I wanted to make sure that everyone's able to access that information that I shared with them. So the first thing is that on this course, I do try to intentionally share multiple ways for you to find out what works for you in terms of a way of learning, but also in terms of collecting the points towards the final grade. So not only will I offer the weekly assignments and exams and practicals, and those would add up to 100%. I offer alternative ways to collect those points. So let's have a look at that a little bit. So the first way how I do that is through discussion forums. So again, discussion forums are not a required part of your course. I like to offer them mainly because it's a great tool for us to form that sense of community, but also to have more instant feedback. I don't want you to submit an assignment and wait until then for me to rectify if there's something that we're not quite grasping, or to get a confirmation that yes, you've got that concept clear. If you want, you can use these discussion forums for a little bit more instant interaction. And this more instant interaction can include not just myself, but also your peers. So I encourage you, when you see a question or a comment from a peer, to respond to that. I will be monitoring the discussion forums very tightly, and I'll try to be very, very active there. So if you have something that you have questions that you want clarity on, you can totally drop that message there, and I normally will answer within 24 hours to that. But I also encourage it as a space to kind of summarize what are the key points of the material that we've had a look of, place to ask questions, and also a place to share resources. And a shout out to everyone from the last discussion forum who shared alternative videos that might help to explain a concept and so on. So these are really a space that you can make to what you want them to be. But what I want to highlight is that these discussion forums are optional, so I do not require you to do those. You do not need to go to those, or you can just simply read those if you prefer. But I do want to recognize anyone who does take part on discussion forums, and one way how I can recognize that is through giving extra credit points for participation on discussion forums. And in order for me to be able to give those extra credit points, I had to change the discussion forums as an assignment. But please notice that it's an assignment that's worth 0 points. So even if you don't do discussion forum as such, your grade is by no means negatively impacted by that. So you can earn more than 1 point if you're participating, but it is not required. I do realize it's a little irritating. It shows up on your assignments or tasks to do list, especially as the closing date for discussion forum approaches. But keep in mind, it's worth 0 points. You do not have to worry about that. So hopefully that clarifies that when it comes to the discussion forums. And I do think that those are great spaces and useful spaces. So consider if that would work. The other way how I do want to offer an additional opportunity to earn points, but also have a different kind of a learning experience, is those through want more assignments. And like I've shared a few times now, these want more assignments are again an extra credit opportunity, not a required part of your coursework. Typically, these want more assignments go to a little bit more advanced level of detail. They provide application-based concepts, or apply the concepts that we're studying. They provide more clinical way of looking at the concepts that we're studying. So they're a great resource, great opportunity there. You will find the want more assignments at the end of each learning module. So let's jump to our learning modules and have a look at this week's learning module. After the homework, and homework is what I'm asking you to do for each week, you do see also the want more assignments. And first, what you'll see on the want more is a kind of a page where you'll learn more about a short synopsis of the content for that week, some key concepts, and then I have multiple different kinds of assignments that you could do from that. I have discussion topics. Usually these are more of things that you can consider on a broader sense, and things that don't have definitely a single right answer, so they provide us opportunities to have dialogue. I also have critical thinking questions, which are applying the course content that you've learned to kind of a more of a usable setting, or asking you to take it a little bit further. And finally, I tend to have always a clinical application question, if not few, that again let you play how to utilize the information that you've learned in a clinical setting. So that's what's available there for you on the Want More assignment. Once you have answered to one or multiple of those questions, you can submit your Want More assignment response to an area underneath that page. You'll notice there's a symbol that it's an activity, and again, it's an activity that carries 0 points. So you do not need to complete that activity, but if you choose to complete it, then of course you can earn more than 0 points from that. So you have few ways of submitting your answers. You can do it as a file on another application, for example, on a Word, or you can do it by hand on a piece of paper and upload that then here, or you can even type it into your submission space. However you submit it, and even if you wish to submit it in few pieces, you first do some work and then you're like, oh, I'll do a little more. You can absolutely do that. Submit your assignment. And then once you've submitted it, I will provide individual feedback for anyone who does these Want More assignments, and will unpack what were the high points, which were the things where we can expand on those answers, or sometimes I just discuss that a little bit further. So I wanted to show where to submit these. I do want to make sure that when you're submitting an assignment to me, and you're uploading a file, that we're very, very clear that that file has to be Windows compatible. So our grading software that we use for your courses is built on Windows platform. So if you submit me a Mac file, I won't be able to open it and I won't be able to see it. And obviously that would be a great shame for the work that you have done. So if that happens, I normally send you a message and ask you to resubmit it for me. But to avoid that kind of a delay and extra steps, make sure that the files that you send me are in a format that can be opened on Windows operating system. So those were the big things that I wanted to share about these additional ways of earning points that you have. I get quite a few students asking every now and then that how much Want More assignments do I need to do? Well, really, there's no answer to that. That would be that you have to do it in particular. Want More assignments are completely optional, so you can do it as much or as little as you wish. If you choose to do Want More assignments, to give you kind of a rule of thumb that kind of guides you how they are graded, obviously the number of questions you answer, the accuracy of your answers, and the depth that your answer goes into. You'll see that a lot of these questions are questions that you can answer very superficially or really dig into that. That has an effect on how many points there are up for grabs and how many points you'll get. But I've offered this rule of thumb for my students for a while now, that if you were to answer to all of the Want More questions, and all of those answers were correct, and they were of a sufficient depth of detail, that would add up to the same number of points that you have available as the traditional homework assignments for that chapter. So you do have option that if you don't want to do that homework, you could theoretically just do the Want More assignments instead. Or if you didn't ace every single question, you can do some of the Want More assignments and get some points. So it really is whatever you want to get out of that, and whatever you want to do, that's what you do for those assignments. So I hope that that clarifies a little bit and sets your mind at ease, that you're not worried if you see any due dates for assignments that carry 0 points for them. These are literally just extra credit things. The things that I normally ask you to do is whatever is listed underneath the homework. The other thing that I wanted to share about real briefly is that I did have some questions asking, how do I succeed in this class? What can I do to do really, really well? Well, I do have quite a few resources on the Start Here module. I'm discussing a little bit more of what's expected, what are some good strategies, what previous students have shared with me. So you have that as a verbal document. But I also have been teaching anatomy and physiology for a long time. And I've been teaching anatomy and physiology at the many different levels, from non-majors to majors. And I've ended up developing a little bit of study tips and tricks. So I have a video for you with more details underneath it about studying in general, and especially studying anatomy and physiology, how to succeed in that. Also, a chance for you to find out what's the best learning approach for you, what you might want to do, and then how to tackle case studies, which are something that we sometimes also tackle in the field of anatomy and physiology. So all of those resources are there available for you if that's something that you would be interested. Obviously, I am always available for one-on-one chats as well, but if that's something that you feel would be useful for you, look for those at the Start Here module. And I think that those were the biggest kind of announcement kind of things that I wanted to share with you of this course, and how to approach this course, and what has been going on recently, what questions I've been receiving. Like I said, I always try to make sure that I do share those answers with all of the students, not just with the student who happens to present the question. So that's one of the big reasons why I'm very much in favor and encourage you to consider of using those discussion forums, coming to these live settings so we can get any questions answered, but we can also share those answers with everyone. So the next thing that I want to do, I want to jump back to the learning material, back to our chapter material, and let's discuss a little bit about some of the key themes of this week's chapter. Obviously, you'll get the full story when you go to the learning materials on the canvas, but I always try to provide you this kind of a nutshell version of what's important. And earlier on, we might have seen that life can be studied in many different levels of detail. We can talk about atoms and elements. Those are the smallest level of what we can break material into by normal chemical means. You do know that atoms, when they join together, they form molecules. And then we have macromolecules that are particularly large molecules. We also have cell organelles as a one level up from that, and cell organelles are found within the cell. So when multiple cells come together, they form tissues. And we end up finding multiple tissues that work for the same purpose on the same localized area, forming an organ of the body. And once we have multiple organs that come together, again serving the same purpose, they form an organ system. And of course, human body, human individual is an organism, and that was made of multiple organ systems working together. So from this discussion, we really see that cells are the basic fundamental unit of life. They're the smallest level that we can look at something that's independently alive. And the size of the cells in generally pretty small, and there is some variation of that. We can have sometimes some cells that are larger than what I've listed here. These would be more of kind of exceptions. For example, the nerve cells that form the spinal cord, they are rather long, but typically cells are small. And your lecture video will go on to the discussion of why cells are typically so small. So, like I mentioned, life can be studied at various scales, various different of levels of detail. And in our classes, in biology classes, you probably have used light microscopes. Light microscopes are really good. They allow us to see smaller things than what would be available for you to see with a naked eye. Uh, Typically to the level that you can tell that there's a cell, maybe a cell nucleus and cell membranes, and see the cytoplasm, but you're definitely not going to see with a light microscope the cell organelles. They are much smaller than what the light microscopy can reveal to us. So we do have an option of using electron microscopes that allow us to see even smaller structures than just stopping at the level of cells, studying those cell organelles and other smaller structures. So you have that option available for you with an electron microscope. I wanted to make sure that we are kind of clear of the terminology. So when we study cells, we talk about study of cytology. When we study multiple cells that have came together, forming to a function that serves the same purpose on a same region, we talk about histology. We're talking about tissues of that area. So tissues, like I mentioned, are groups of similar cells, and they often share a similar structure, common function, and they are located at that same area. So the study of tissues is known as histology, and if that's something that you're interested, this chapter gives you a flavor of that, and you will be learning more about histology of anatomical structures throughout the course as we go to relevant systems. So for the time being, I think a good place for us to start is by looking at basic tissue types that we find in the body. What are the most common tissue types? And there's really four basic tissue types. In reality, there's much more other tissues as well, but these are the most important ones that I want us to look. So we will talk a little bit about epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissues, and nervous tissues. And I think a good place for us to start is by having a look of just kind of a general definition, general description of each of these four basic tissue types. So epithelial tissues are found forming boundaries or protective layers in the body. Often they are layers that are particularly good for functions like secretion, absorption, and filtering. So some of the examples that I can think of the epithelial tissues, well, obvious one that we're going to start our course with as an organ system would be our integumentary system and the skin in that system. So a very good example of epithelial tissue forming the boundary between inside and outside of the body. We also find epithelial tissues, for example, lining our digestive tract. So that's another place where we might look for them. We will also have connective tissues. Connective tissues really do what the name proposes. They connect your body and parts of the body from one to another. How I often describe the connective tissues to my students is that they form connections not just physically, like, for example, bones, tendons, and ligaments, but also physiologically, like, for example, blood. Blood connects different body parts by transporting materials between them. So collectively, if we are again talking about what connective tissues do, they support the body structures, they protect body structures, and they bind body structures together. Connective tissues are an incredibly varied group, so there's a lot that we can go into there, but I think that that's at this high level review is sufficient for us. Next basic tissue type that I wanted to talk about is going to be our muscle tissues. And we really have three types of muscles: skeletal muscles, cardiac muscles, and smooth muscles. And when we think about these, but muscles really do, especially when we think about the skeletal muscles and cardiac muscle as well, they contract. And as they contract, they create movement. So the big muscles that we'll study when we get to the skeletal muscles of the body, their main function is to create some sort of a movement in a body by contracting and relaxing. Skeletal muscles, like I said, are the striking muscles that we see when we look with the naked eye and study different parts of the body. Cardiac muscle found only within the heart, and smooth muscle typically found, for example, around blood vessels, at the intestines, forming also sphincters between different parts of the digestive tract. Finally, let's have a look of the nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is responsible for our internal communication in the body. That includes our brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And because we're going to spend so much of our later part of this semester together talking about the nervous tissue, I'm leaving it fairly general at this point of the course. We'll get to dive in to a more detail later on this course. So let's start by focusing on epithelial tissues or epithelium. There's really two main forms of epithelial tissues. We have various different coverings and linings, such as the skin, that form linings, coverings, both externally and internally in the body. We also have a glandular epithelia. Glandular epithelia are made of contain secretory tissue that we find in the glands. So a good example of that would be, for example, your salivary glands or sweat glands. That's the second type of epithelial tissue that we see. But if we really look at the functions of the epithelial tissue collectively on a high level, they are responsible for protecting your body, for processes where we move materials across these membranes. So absorption, filtration, exertion, secretion. And we do also find epithelial tissues often important in sensory reception. So sense organs or sense structures that we find, for example, on the skin for touch, pain, temperature, and so on and so on. Well, epithelial tissues can be classified in two main ways. We can talk about epithelial tissue being simple. That means that it's made of single layer of cells. So the single layer of cells on top of basement membrane. Or we can say that epithelia is stratified. Stratified means that there's multiple layers of cells on top of that basement membrane. That can be two or more layers. So simple tissues, one layer, stratified, multiple layers. Another way how we might look at epithelial tissue classification is by looking at the shape of the cells. And here we're seeing squamous cells. So these look like flattened discs. They have a nucleus. They form these smooth, tightly packed surfaces, and in that sense form boundaries. We can also have cuboidal epithelia. These are cube or I guess dice-shaped cells. So not flattened like squamous, but more of a cube dice-shaped structures. And finally, we have columnar epithelia. These are pillar or column shape. And again, each one of these will have the shape of a cell, will have or shape of a tissue, will have an impact on its function. It's obviously easier for materials to pass through squamous layers than it is for materials to pass through columnar layers. Now let's have a look of the shape of the cells as it comes to multi-layered tissues. When we try to classify stratified epithelia, that what shape of the cell we have there, we focus on the outermost free layer of the cells on that tissue. So if we have multiple different cell shapes, we're focusing on the outermost layer, what shape the cells are there. And like you can work out from this picture, often we actually put together these two ways of classifying cells. So on the first picture, we're seeing single layer of squamous cells. So we would call it simple squamous epithelia. On the second picture on the bottom row, we actually see multiple layers of cells. So that would be stratified tissue. And we see that they're cube-shaped. So this would be stratified cuboidal epithelia. So oftentimes the description of a tissue, the name of a tissue type gives you a clue about the composition of that tissue. And that again allows us to then start working what's the function, what's the physiology involved with that tissue. So that might be a helpful way to make a start. I do also want to mention at this point that we do have some tissues that we can call pseudostratified. So these are tissues, epithelial tissues, that might appear as being made of multiple layers, but in reality, it's just a single layer that we see. So pseudo referring to a fake. So in this case, fake stratified tissues. So they're not really stratified, they fake, they pretend to be stratified, but in reality, they're just one single layer of cells. Let's have a look of the glandular epithelia a little bit. So the purpose of the glands is that they contain cells that make and secrete fluids. And glands can be classified into two main categories. We can talk about endocrine glands. These are glands that produce hormones, and these hormones are released directly to the bloodstream, and they travel in the bloodstream to all parts of the body. Or we can talk about exocrine glands. These glands have the gland part, they have a duct part, and they release the secretions locally on the surface close to them. So I think good examples would be, for example, sweat gland, salivary glands, lacrimal gland next to the eye, and so on and so on. So two ways of classifying glands. We'll focus on the endocrine system later on this your 202 course when we start with talking about hormones. Most examples that you'll see on this course, especially when we're talking about the skin and skin structure, are going to be exocrine glands. Glands can be made of a single cell, or they can be also multicellular glands. So that's something to keep in mind, that multiple cells again come together to perform the same function, in this case, to form a gland to produce and release secretions. So that was our first tissue type. Let's have a look at our second tissue type, which is going to be our connective tissues. And connective tissues, like I said, do what the name proposes. They connect body parts and body structures. So they can be important in binding, providing support for the body, protecting structures, insulating things, especially if we're talking of adipose tissue, storing reserve fuel, again, fat tissue, good example of that, or transporting substances such as what blood does. So there's really actually four main classes of connective tissue. We have connective tissue proper, we have cartilages, we have bone, and we have blood. So I hope that that kind of helps you to work out the variety of what connective tissues can represent. If we think of the connective tissue proper, I could think of examples. For example, we see those in lungs, we see them in fat cells, tendons, ligaments, things like that. Cartilage, obviously, again, tendons, ligaments to think about. There's different types, different levels of ability to handle forces, different elasticity. When we talk about bones, again, we can further classify bones into spongy and compact bones. We'll talk about that when we get to skeletal system. And finally, we had our blood, and obviously with the blood as well, we have many different elements that go there: red blood cells, white blood cells, plasma, and so on. When we talk about the connective tissues, one thing that we see is that all connective tissues are generally made of these three elements. They have ground substance, they have fibers, and they have cells in them. So those are the three common characteristics that we find. They might vary, but we find those three parts that form a connective tissue. And that helps us now to move on to talk about muscle tissues. Like I mentioned, the most obvious thing that many of us think about when we think about muscle tissues is that muscle tissues are responsible for generating movement. And there's really three types of muscle tissue. There's skeletal muscle tissue, which were those big muscles that we see that move body, help us to uh, get around in the world where we live in. You can go to a gym to train your skeletal muscles, make them bigger. We have cardiac muscle found only within the heart. So the heart, the pump that pumps the blood around the cardiovascular system. And finally, smooth muscle, which was responsible for regulating vessel diameter, for example, whether it is in cardiovascular system or within the digestive tract, forming sphincters also in digestive tract, things like that. And let's have a look of histology of each of these muscle types. Skeletal muscle cells are characterized by being these cylindrical in shape. They have multiple nuclei and they have these stripes, which are known as striations. Typically, we see that these nuclei are at the edge of the cylinder-shaped cell. We see that skeletal muscles are under voluntary control, so you can choose to do movements, and then they respond to those commands that you're sending to them. Let's compare those to cardiac muscle cells. Cardiac muscle cells are typically branched, so they have multiple branches that allows cardiac muscle cells to connect with multiple other cardiac muscle cells. These connection points, in fact, have an adaptation known as intercalated disc. Intercalated discs facilitate easy passage of materials across it. So again, we can synchronize the movements of the cardiac muscle cells so that on one area, all of those cells do the same thing. They tend to have one nucleus, so they're uninucleated, and they have these stripes. They are striated. Cardiac muscle tissue, cardiac muscle cells are involuntary. You do not need to think about, I'm going to have a heartbeat now. It happens automatically. And finally, let's have a look of our smooth muscle. Smooth muscle cells really vary a lot in shape depending on what they're doing, but often they're described as these spindle-shaped cells. They have a single nucleus centrally in the cell, and they do not have striations. These again are involuntary cells, so you don't have to think about, oh, I'm going to expand my blood vessel diameter. It happens automatically. Same for the functions of the digestive tract and movement of material within the digestive tract. Now, let's finish off by having a look of nervous tissue. Nervous tissue is, of course, important in regulation and control of your body functions. And we will talk in great detail about the nervous system as we move to the second half of this course. The main parts of the nervous system include brain, spinal cord, and nerves. And during that part of the course, we'll get to dive into finer nuances and details of these nervous tissue cells. There's really two types of nervous tissue cells. There's going to be neurons, which are the actual nerve cells, and we'll talk about those. And then we have supporting cells, which are known as neuroglia. They support the nerve cells to do their function, do what they're set to do. And that really brings me to the end of this review of all the material that I wanted to talk about when it comes to the discussing the key points of this chapter's material. This, of course, doesn't mean that you shouldn't look at the canvas material that you have available for you. It's very valuable to review those, but they should give you kind of a nutshell version of what's important. And as I jump to this slide, I will simply mention that although we're wrapping up here today, next week we will be looking at various different basic chemistry of life, cells, and we'll talk a little bit about genetics. And next we'll finish our review of the basic concepts before we're then ready to start to go through system by system, different body systems. As always, I am here to help you to succeed on this course, so please let me know how I can be of an assistance. Use those discussion forums, use options to message me directly on Canvas, and use these live online settings. Remember, I also offer office hours electronically through my WebEx room. So those are some of the options that we have available for you. I hope this short session was useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the discussion forums, seeing you at the Canvas course, and interacting with you more there. Please make sure that you submit the weekly assignments under the homeworks heading. Those are the little points that add up towards your final grade. And then you have all these other ways of earning extra credit. We'll finish there for today. Thank you again, and I hope you have a very good week. Let me know how I can be of an assistance. Until next time, bye.